This study will shock Friedrich Merz to his core. Most Germans have already quit. And I'll explain to you in a moment why that is. Die SPD glaubt jetzt allen Ernstes, wenn Menschen mal auf die Intensivstation kommen, dann haben sie auch mal ein Recht da zu bleiben, mehr in der Lage, in der Grundschule, nicht in der ersten Klasse, einen Baum zu malen. And I have a lot more for you. Now they'll explain to you why you should shower in the dark and why you can sleep better afterwards. But that has absolutely nothing to do with the energy that we probably don't have anymore. So today we're going to look at the top hot topics of the morning. And I've brought along some things that almost make my toes curl when I hear them.
In the new Gallup Engagement Index of 2025, 77% of employees state that they have only a weak emotional attachment to their employers. Attention, thank you very much.
So, in fact, 77% of all people here in Germany don't feel like working anymore. What could be the reason for that? However, anyone who now claims that it's because of all the crises we're having here. And maybe it's because politics doesn't give us even a spark of hope. Of course, he's got it all wrong. If you'd like to support this channel, since YouTube keeps restricting these topics because they don't want you to know the truth, I would be really happy if you gave me a like and subscribed so that we can simply share these topics with a few more people. What we're being told right now in the propaganda media is making sure that we'll never get a change in politics here unless we all stick together. I'd like to thank you in advance. Thank you so much for pressing the button.
The resulting productivity losses amount to up to 142 billion euros. The authors of the study mainly blame a lack of leadership skills for employees mentally quitting their jobs.
Thank you very much. Yes, and that has absolutely nothing to do with how little net income is left after taxes, because people are simply no longer willing. If you have a mini job today, you sometimes earn more than with a full-time job, because there are fewer deductions. If my wife worked 10 hours more, she would get less money than she does now. There's definitely something seriously wrong with politics. The crises out there, we just need to listen. 200 million for Ukraine could be allocated very quickly. But when it comes to lowering energy prices or gas prices here in Germany, that's impossible. Now the fuel price can only be raised once a day, but then it's done properly and there are no upper limits. Oil reserves are being released, but they will only last until the middle of this year. And Austria, of course, is once again ahead. And now children in elementary school can't even draw a tree anymore. It won't be much different here in Germany. So what do we notice? Politics here is simply putting the lid on the coffin. They're hammering in the last nails. They don't even want to save this country anymore. They just want to run it into the ground and squeeze out the last few billion euros for no reason. That's my opinion on the matter.
After the state election in Baden-Württemberg, a neck-and-neck race is also emerging in Rhineland-Palatinate.
Yes, and the politics being done there aren't for the citizens, but once again, just against the alternative for Germany. So the last thing they have up their sleeve is peace, joy, and pancakes. To stick with the Christian Democratic Union and at the same time embarrass themselves so badly in the election arena. Where I really have to say, and this is someone affected, tell me, when will you finally realize that the people you despise so much are the ones paying your taxes and your salaries?
The Christian Democratic Union with top candidate Gordon Schneider reaches 29%. The ruling Social Democratic Party led by Alexander Schweitzer gets 28%. Yes.
And the Christian Democratic Union and the Social Democratic Party, they got along pretty well again yesterday, while you could clearly see that the Christian Democratic Union wanted to win over the Alternative for Germany voters, and the Social Democratic Party wants to win over the voters of the left and the Greens. And of course, the Christian Democratic Union also wanted to take in the free voters. That's how the whole thing was set up. Just one thing for me as someone affected who is constantly sick anyway with cancer, and you can hear it again now. Yeah, I have to say that was really something for every chronically ill person. Yeah, that was a real slap in the face. Where I then say, hey, honestly, the best thing would be if the 77% who are done with their jobs would just quit. and see how the politicians react to that.
A lot in regional clinics, but in these regional clinics, there are no emergency rooms or intensive care units anymore. That's what scares people, as we heard earlier in the clip.
Exactly. Now they're focusing on regional clinics. Why are they focusing on regional clinics? Because they're much cheaper and more cost efficient. But if you really need a doctor and something really serious happens, now helicopters have to be used to get you from A to B as quickly as possible. I'll tell you a little story at the end about something that happened to me in the past. I once fell off a ladder and suffered severe bruising to my LWL. And yes, my wife came with me into the computed tomography scan back then. And the doctors immediately said in the heat of the moment, he'll never be able to walk again. But later, after the swelling went down and after the magnetic resonance imaging things got better, I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. And things like that really scare me when we really need doctors.
That in the case of a serious accident, for example, the way to the nearest hospital is too far. Can you really expect people to deal with that? Yes.
I've been taken to the hospital by an emergency doctor twice. One time, I told you about the severe bruises. That's when I fell and got a fracture in my back. And because it could be treated immediately, the swelling went down and there was no damage. Doctors likely understand what I mean better than others. Although I was on sick leave for another year and a half afterwards because I could hardly walk and had to do rehab, I was able to walk again later. Today, I still have back pain, for example, when the weather changes or something like that, but because I was able to get treatment right away, and the ambulance only took about 6 minutes to get me into the hospital, and it was already there after 3.5 minutes. That's what the doctor told me back then. That was an absolute lifesaver in this rural area. Nowadays, you would expect that, for example, such a patient transport could take up to an hour and a half, where you're riding in an emergency vehicle where you might need to be resuscitated or even airlifted by helicopter. So even here, and the second thing I've mentioned before for those of you in the military. Back then in Shiloh, I almost lost my life because of an EPA and I was airlifted out with a Sikorsky helicopter. It was pretty close there too that I actually, well, survived the whole thing. But, and I have to say this too, that second transport, yeah, that was really to a longer hospital stay. And for example, with a much closer hospital, they could have done something much, much sooner. And that's why I know very well that this could end up being fatal for very, very many people. But maybe that's what they want. Yes, maybe it's being done deliberately without saying it. These are just thoughts that are coming to me right now.
Hermeski.
Which doesn't have an intensive care unit, no emergency room.
Yes, but it works so well because people know it's a good option if something happens right away. I can get help quickly. I can also be well taken care of there. I can have surgery. I can also stay overnight.
So, my uncle is a paramedic with the professional fire department, and he told me that something like this will cost a lot of lives. He can say whatever he wants. The people who are in acute danger, ambulances are not designed for that, and neither are helicopters. If they need to be operated on as quickly as possible, a whole lot of people will end up dying because of that. That should be said because transportation really can't be guaranteed, and once again they're willing to accept the loss of human lives. Just to send another one to 200 million to Brazil to save the Amazon. Of course, I could keep adding to the list. And you can see once again, these politicians only care about their own greedy interests, just to stash away as much money as possible. Or do you seriously believe there wouldn't be any kickbacks, that Zelensky wouldn't maybe send something back even here in Ukraine? Why? So much money is lost to corruption there, isn't it? I'm absolutely sure there are kickbacks as well, but as I said, that's just my private and personal opinion. Just a quick note, if I accidentally edited something twice into the video yesterday or repeated something, I'm sorry about that. I'm a bit under the weather. Once again, you know this, every 3 or 4 months my cancer really did a number on me, even though it's encapsulated now. That I constantly keep getting colds over and over again, but this time with my homemade antibiotics, it's much better. This time I can work through it completely. Please forgive me if I repeat myself once or twice.